Ladies and gentlemen, James Lane here, and with all eyes on Georgia, all the other states that are doing dastardly and dirty things behind our backs are hoping nobody'll turn their heads and take notice, but we here at the American Reveille podcast, we here see these things. We listen to you. We had a fan reach out to us and let us know what the hell was happening in the state of New York, and it stinks. Ladies and gentlemen, Assembly Bill A416 on the New York State Senate website. It relates to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable diseases who are potentially dangerous to the public health. This is a bill that's in the committee. It's going to go onto the floor and be voted on, most likely, ladies and gentlemen. And who gets to decide based on what opinion do you get to remove people that are a danger to society? Well, based on Andrew Cuomo's opinion, of course. You're not going to want to miss this, folks. You need to know this information because it's time to stand up and fight back. Watch next. Ladies and gentlemen, James Lane here. How you guys doing today? I appreciate all the support. I just want to say thank you. I know that it was a weird morning for everybody. You're used to getting a lot of notifications and information from me, but the computer had a hard failure. So we had to go get that repaired. A good thing we had some parts lying around because we were planning an upgrade anyway. So it is fixed. Things are better. We are back online. The machine is alive, ladies and gentlemen. I had a fan bring this to my attention today, and it's actually quite shocking, and I want to give a shout out to @DDMK on Parler. That's @DDMK. He's the one that sent me this. All right, I look at everything that you guys send me, and this is on the New York State Senate website. It's absolutely ridiculous. This could lead to internment camps. This could lead to Holocaust. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Assembly Bill A416. And this relates to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable diseases who are potentially dangerous to the public health. Ladies and gentlemen, this was sponsored by Perry. It is in the committee now, and they're going to see if they put it on the floor calendar. This could come up for a vote. This could become the law. All right. You need to hear what this is about. It relates to the removal of cases. So that's anybody that's thought to be sick, contacts anybody who's thought to know anybody and come in touch with they who were sick or happen to have a communicable disease on a specified list, I guess. Those diseases that are potentially dangerous to the public health. Very vague. Very vague. This came out January 6th. Well, it's supposed to be coming through January 6th, excuse me. And it's going to be introduced into the 2021 to 2022 session that will be in Assembly by Perry, all right? Folks, before we read this, I want you to understand that somebody has to decide what sick is. Everything that we've seen change with the introduction of the China virus, the COVID-19 plague that was sent here by a militant Chinese Communist Party, everything shows that anything is possible. Everything that we've seen shows that the radical left and the Democrat sympathizers, they're willing to do whatever it takes, and they will do whatever it takes. So don't put anything out of your mind. Don't put any possibilities out of the realm of possibility. Ladies and gentlemen, this is real, and this is on the table. All right? So before we go through it, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell. Any one of the three or the combination of all three is very appreciated. Folks, that's how people see what we are doing. That is how we get the word out. Same thing on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating. Please, please, please write a review, and it helps move us up the rankings. More patriots get to see what we're doing with the American Reveille movement, and they get to acquire, attain, and assimilate the tools that help them wake more people up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this. Introduced by M of A Perry. Read once and referred to the Committee on Health. An act to amend the public health law in relation to the removal of cases, contacts, and carriers of communicable diseases who are potentially dangerous to the public health. The people of the state of New York, represented in Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows. Section 1. The public health law is amended by adding a new section, 2120 Tac Alpha, to read as follows. Section 2120 Tac Alpha. Removal and detention of cases, contacts, and carriers who are or may be a danger to public health. Other orders. The provisions of this section shall be utilized in the event that the governor declares a state of health emergency due to an epidemic of any communicable disease. So next time, there's an issue, which could happen at any time if China decides to send us another virus. Next time, Cuomo or anybody sitting in that golden toilet, they could just remove people and detain them. I wonder how that's going to go. Let's keep reading. Upon determining by clear and convincing evidence that the health of others is or may be endangered by a case, contact, or carrier, or suspected case, contact, or carrier of a contagious disease that, in the opinion of the governor, after consultation with the commissioner, may pose an imminent and significant threat to the public health, resulting in severe morbidity or high mortality. You mean like moving the elderly to nursing homes infested with COVID and killing 30,000 of your fellow New Yorkers, Andrew Cuomo? Interesting. The governor or his or her delegee, including but not limited to the commissioner or the heads of local health departments, may order the removal and or detention of such a person or of a group of such persons by issuing a single order identifying such persons either by name or by a reasonably specific description of the individual or group being detained. What, like a barcode? Such person or group of persons shall be detained in a medical facility or other appropriate facility, ladies and gentlemen. Are the alarms going off yet? Red flags, hello? Such person or group of persons shall be detained in a medical facility or other appropriate facility. Let's talk about facilities, ladies and gentlemen. They have facilities like re-education camps, like the ones the Chinese government sends the Uyghurs to so they can be sterilized or even killed. Like the re-education camps that Adolf Hitler used. It's okay. Just take a shower. Nothing bad will happen, right? Folks, history repeats itself. You need to be paying attention to what I'm reading right now. It's just horrifying. This other appropriate facility could be designated by the governor or his or her delegee and complying with subdivision 5 of this section. Hitler had a delegee. I think his name was Goebbels. Anyway, a person or group removed or detained by order of the governor or his or her delegee pursuant to subdivision 2. There we go. Subdivision 2 of this section shall be explanation matter in italics. Underscored is new. Matter in brackets is the old stuff. So these are the changes. Basically, the new stuff is in parentheses and what's it called? It's underscored. Yeah, italics, excuse me. And the old stuff is in these brackets. So we'll go through this. Detained for such period and in such manner as the department may direct in accordance with this section. All right. A confirmed case or a carrier who is detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section shall not continue to be detained after the department determines that such person is no longer contagious. Well, what happens if they don't determine that or can't determine that? A suspected case or suspected carrier who is detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section shall not continue to be detained after the department determines with the exercise of due diligence, not like they use due diligence in anything else, that such person is not infected with or has not been exposed to such a disease, or if infected with or exposed to such a disease, no longer is or will become contagious. A person who is detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section as a contact of a confirmed case or carrier shall not continue to be detained after the department determines that that person is not infected with the disease or that such contact no longer presents a potential danger to the health of others. See, how do you determine this? You don't even get to determine what a disease is because they don't define it. What if they thought an ideology was a disease and it's a spreading disease? Because, for example, we could convince other people that Trump is the best president. Let's say we're convincing others that Trump is the best president. And in their world, their correct far left world, they believe that we have a disease, a mental problem that makes us believe in Trump as our leader. That disease spread, so those people must be contained. Those people must be sterilized. That's how this stuff starts, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not trying to be, I am trying to be dramatic, but I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to open your eyes to the truth. If anybody from New York is listening or watching this, you need to be fighting this with every being, every ounce of being in your body. Everything, ladies and gentlemen, everything. A person who is detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section as a contact of a suspected case shall not continue to be detained after the department determines with the exercise of due diligence that the suspected case was not infected with a disease or was not infected at the time the contact was exposed to such individual, or 2, after the department determines that the contact no longer presents a potential danger to the health of others. How do you determine that somebody is not a potential danger? Ladies and gentlemen, how do you determine that? It's not specified. A person who is detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section as is appropriate to the circumstances have his or her medical condition and needs addressed on a regular basis, and be detained in a manner that is consistent with recognized isolation and infection control principles in order to minimize the likelihood of transmission or infection to other persons. So basically solitary confinement. When a person or group is ordered to be detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section for a period not exceeding 3 business days, such person or member of such group shall upon request be afforded an opportunity to be heard. But if a person or group detained pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section needs to be detained beyond 3 business days, there you go, they shall be provided with an additional commissioner's order pursuant to subdivisions 2 and 8 of this section. So when a person or group is ordered to be detained pursuant to the subdivision of this section for a period exceeding the 3 business days, right? And such person or member of such group requests release. Do you see that added in there? We have to request our own release. What if they don't allow you to? What if they put you under some sort of treatment that doesn't make it easy to request anything? What if they don't give you the right to request? What if your voice is never heard? What happens to those 3 days, ladies and gentlemen? What happens to those 3 days? So if they don't make that request, the governor or his or her delegee shall make an application for a court order authorizing such detention within 3 business days after such request by the end of the first business day following such Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, because that's important, which application shall include a request for an expedited hearing. After such request for release, detention shall not continue for more than 5 business days in the absence of a court order authorizing detention. Notwithstanding the foregoing provisions, in no event shall any person be detained for more than 60 days. Now, see where it says notwithstanding the foregoing provisions? All right, see that? That's a sign. The governor or his or her delegee shall seek further court review of such detention within 90 days following the initial court order. You see what I'm saying here? They're saying, yeah, we have to go through the court. But what if the court's crooked? We see crooked courts all the time now. What if the commissioner's crooked? What if the governor is crooked? Ask yourself, Is Andrew Cuomo crooked? Would you trust Andrew Cuomo to babysit your daughter or son? Would you trust him to walk your dogs? Would you trust him to mow your lawn? I wouldn't trust him to give me a pedicure, ladies. No, I wouldn't trust a lot of people to give me a pedicure. Anyway, look, right here where it says they should seek further review. What if when they do that review, they say these people need to be detained indefinitely? 6 months, 6 years, 60 years. What happens if the national emergency declared ends up declaring another type of national emergency that would suspend people's habeas corpus? What if that happens? How long do you disappear into the New York gulags? How long, ladies and gentlemen? The governor, all right, where it says they should seek this within 90 days. I mean, really? Do you really think that's going to happen? In any court proceeding to enforce an order of the governor or his or her delegee for A416, the removal or detention of a person or group issued pursuant to this subdivision for review of the continued detention of a person or group, the governor or his or her delegee shall prove the particularized circumstances constituting the necessary for such a detention by clear and convincing evidence. And all they need to do is have another pandemic where people are getting sick, and all the judges will do whatever the governor wants. We saw that. You see these tyrannical rules, these tyrannical laws that pass, these regulations, the stranglehold of the people of Michigan, the people of Washington State, Oregon, California, the stranglehold in Pennsylvania, the stranglehold in New York, the stranglehold across the blue parts of this country, strangling their own people. Do you really think that they wouldn't bow in case of another false emergency? Ladies and gentlemen, come on. A copy of any detention order of the governor or his or her delegee issued pursuant to subdivision 2 of this section shall be given to each detained individual. However, if the order applies to a group of individuals and it's impractical to provide individual copies, come on, we can't give people. That insinuates that there could be tens of thousands of people. We don't have that much paper, guys. We can't give you a copy of your detention orders. It may be posted in a conspicuous place in the detention premises. That doesn't scare the shit out of you. If that doesn't terrify you, you might as well go move to a communist country, because that's terrifying. Look, if they can't give you the paperwork, it's going to be listed in the basement level, 3 floors down behind lock and key that you don't have access to because you're busy being chained up and fed garbage with 60,000 other prisoners because you were determined to be dangerous to society, ladies and gentlemen. Contagious with the Trump virus. Come on, folks. It might not ever go that far, but the writing on the wall is right here in this bill, ladies and gentlemen. The purpose of the detention and the legal authority under which the order is issued, including the particular settings of this article or law of regulation, all right? This law or regulation, a description. This is how, by the way, this is how any detention order, all right, is to be set forth. The purpose of the detention and the legal authority under which the order is issued. It includes the particular sections of this order, all right, this article. This is basically what's supposed to be posted in the paperwork you're supposed to get, or, you know, that's somewhere in the mailing room of the detention facility where they're gas chambering people eventually. Anyway, the less restrictive alternatives that were attempted and were unsuccessful, and were less restricted alternatives were considered and rejected, and the reasons such alternatives were rejected. A description of the circumstances or the behavior of the detained person. Do you see what I'm seeing here? Do you see this? Do you hear this? Hear me. It says a description of the circumstances or the behavior of the detained person. That means that if you act a fool while they're illegally detaining you against your will, if you scream, "I'm not sick, there's nothing wrong with me," and you fight back when they detain you, they can hold you as long as they want. They can just write it in this document, folks. It's written right here. They're going to vote on this. The less restrictive alternatives, I read that, For a notice advising the person or group being detained that they have a right to request release from detention. Yeah, you can ask us. And including instructions on how. Okay, so write it on this little piece of paper here that we'll give you this crayon for and slide it through the hole. And we'll get to you when we can. A notice advising a person or group being detained that they have a right to be represented by legal counsel, and upon request of such person or group, access to counsel will be facilitated to the extent feasible under the circumstance. See, when you read these, folks, you really have to pay attention to the wording. That's how they get it in there. That's what they do. That's how this works. I'm not being a conspiracy theorist, all right? I read a lot of contracts. I own a business, all right? This is how it works. Things are written in the contract a certain way so that, and same with bills, so that when and if it has to go to court, depending on how a judge looks at it, it could mean one thing or another. A notice advising the person or group being detained that they may supply the addresses and or telephone numbers of friends and or relatives to receive notification of the person's detention, and that the department shall, at the detained person's request, and to the extent feasible, there it is again, provide notice to a reasonable number of people that the person's being detained. We'll let maybe somebody know at some point. You know, in Soviet Russia, when people got detained, some people didn't find out what happened to their loved ones for 10 years. That's a fact. It's absolute truth. I promise you. You can look it up. In addition, all right, an order issued pursuant to subdivisions 2 and 7 of this section requiring the detention of a person or group for a period exceeding 3 business days shall advise the person or group of the detention to not that the detention shall not continue for more than 5 business days after a request for release has been made in the absence of a court order. Let's just say they don't let you make that request. It's really easy to screw with this. When you think of a mass detention type of situation, it's really easy to just bend their rules and regulations just enough in a legal manner to make somebody disappear forever. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, folks. You can read through this yourself. This also advises the person or group being detained that whether or not they request release from detention, the governor or his or her delegee must obtain a court order authorizing detention within 60 days following the commencement of detention, and thereafter must further seek court review within 90 days of such court order and within 90 days of each subsequent court review. So they could just keep pushing this out 90 days. That's meant to make you feel like they can, there's a lot of avenues for you to get out of this. But if you're detained, they could just keep pushing it 90 days, 90 days, 90 days, depending on what a judge says. I wonder what happens when you don't have the right or the money to pay for a lawyer. And advise the person or group being detained that they have the right to request that legal counsel be provided, that upon such request counsel shall be provided if and to the extent possible under the circumstances, and that if counsel is so provided, that such counsel will be notified that the person or group has requested legal representation. A person who's detained in a medical facility or other appropriate facility or premise. Oh, man. Here you go, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready for this? Are you ready? Here's where it gets fun. A person who's detained in a medical facility or other appropriate facility. So when we send you to the detention camp, you shall not conduct yourself in a disorderly manner. You shall not leave or attempt to leave a facility or premise until discharged, where necessary and feasible under the language, the circumstance. Language interpreters and persons skilled in communicating with vision and hearing impaired individuals shall be provided. The provisions of this section shall not apply to the issuance of orders pursuant to Section 1121 of New York City Health Code, in addition to the removal or detention orders referred to in subdivision 2 of this section, and without affecting or limiting other authority that the commissioner may otherwise have, the governor or his or her delegee may, in his or her discretion, issue and seek enforcement of any other orders that he or she determines are necessary to prevent dissemination or transmission of contagious diseases or other illnesses that may pose a threat to the public, but not limited to orders requiring any person or persons who are not in custody of the department to be excluded, to remain isolated or quarantined at home or at a premises of such person's choice that's acceptable to the state, to the department, and under such conditions, and for such period as will prevent transmission of the contagious disease or other illness, to require the testing or medical examination of persons who may have been exposed. They can come to your house, take you in the middle of the night, ladies and gentlemen, subject you to an alien abduction style, and I'm trying to be funny there, but it's true, probing, a medical examination. Then they can detain you for as long as they want, or tell you that you have to remain detained for as long as you have to be, as they tell you to be. All right. To require an individual who's been exposed to or infected by a contagious disease to complete an appropriate prescribed course of treatment. So they can make you take a drug. They can make you get vaccinations, preventative medication, vaccination, including directly observed therapy. So they can have the police watch you to make sure that you take your pills, get your shots. This is one of the most liberty-restricting bills I've ever seen, ladies and gentlemen. So they can watch. This includes directly observed therapy, all right, to treat the disease and follow infection control provisions for the disease, or to require an individual who's been contaminated with dangerous amounts of radioactive materials or toxic chemicals, such that said individual may present a danger to others. What do they know that we don't know? What's happening behind the scenes, ladies and gentlemen? Why do we have this order about radioactive materials? Why do we have this order saying that they can confine you? They can come to your home. They can subject you. They can force you to vaccinate. They can force you to flee, force you to die in a camp. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem here, a major problem. And you need to spread this word, and you need to help me wake people up, because this is real, ladies and gentlemen. They can make people undergo decontamination procedures. They can watch this as well. Such person or persons shall, upon request, be afforded an opportunity to be heard, but the provisions of subdivisions 2 through 11 of this section shall not otherwise apply. The provisions of this section shall not be constructed to permit or require the forcible administration of any medication without a prior court order. But folks, again, you saw during this coronavirus, this China virus BS, you saw the courts bow to their will. So if they say there's a horrible disease, everybody is dying, a judge will sign any order necessary. They'll just sign them like a freaking drug dealing doctor, signing blank checks to the pharmacy, folks. You absolutely have to spread this, ladies and gentlemen. Let people know. Kudos, bravo, Zulu, awesome stuff. Thank you again to at DDMK6. I just want to say his name again. Thank you again for bringing this to my attention. He also tagged Dan Bongino and Mark Levin, but I don't know if they ever actually read these things. But I am not a big fish, folks. I do read them. So thank you again at DDMK6. I'd give that guy a follow. He is doing some good research. This act shall take effect on the 13th day after it shall have become law, effective immediately. The addition, amendment, and or repeal of any rule or regulation necessary for the implementation of this act on its effective date are authorized to be made and completed on or before such date. So, folks, now you know. This is real. This is happening. This is New York. This is Assembly Bill. For anyone who wants to read it, Assembly Bill A416, coming out of the New York State Senate .gov website, ladies and gentlemen. It's a .gov website. I'm not pulling this out of my butt. It is absolutely real. You can go through it just like I went through it with you. You can study it as much as you want, but this bill is garbage, and it could lead to the mass detainment of people. They don't define the terms disease. They don't define what communicable even means. This could be for the flu. This could be for coronavirus spike round 2. This could be for some disease they make up. This could be for people who believe in a certain thing, for people who believe in traditional values. Do you believe in traditional values? Are you following the American dream? Are you following the Constitution? What happens when Andrew Cuomo deems you contagious? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this one. If you really appreciate what we're doing, do me a favor. Head over to www.americanreveille.com. That's Reveille. You can hit the donation tab. Give us a little donation. I used the donations today to fix our computers so that we could actually get up and running and record this. So thank you guys so much. I've got an email coming to everybody who's donated, and I've got some pictures and other things like that. I really appreciate it. Also, I know there's a lot of folks that have been sending me emails. I've been backed up to holy hell. I see them. I see your emails. I'm going to respond to everybody before the New Year's. I promise. So thank you again so much. Hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, leave a comment, 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, leave a review. I'm James Lane. This is the American Reveille, and I will see you later in the next segment. Have a good one.